at the end of August 66, and this is another amazing fact to me, we all met the Beatles in 64. In August of 66, the Beatles had permanently retired from touring. 2 years after they got here, they retired from touring. I didn't know that, Michael. That really caught me by surprise when I read that.
Oh, yeah, but it was incessant touring like no other act had ever experienced on planet Earth.
Right.
And you know what? The amount of shows.
Right.
I'm trying to remember the name of the writer that kind of catalogs their recordings as well as the dates this and that happened. Mark Lewison's book.
Okay.
And, I mean, he goes back to the cavern days, quarrymen days, and the thousands of shows those guys did. It was a more primitive time, folks. All right. So, every hour counted, and a 15-hour trip to Australia or whatever, was a major roadblock for them. And it all happened. And in those so-called 2 years, which actually goes back to them before they became a worldwide phenomenon. Right. So it was years that the Beatles were gigging. And
well, they just got burnt out. They pushed them too hard. That happens a lot too.
Their latter stuff was stuff that you would put as more adult contemporary. If dads and moms were loving Yesterday, and the nice love songs now, and so the kids were kind of, it's not so, and that was the perfect time for Pepper.
I would argue that actually a lot of the groundwork for this, and you guys probably maybe already talked about this, I always saw Revolver as Sgt. Pepper Part 1 because the psychedelic elements are there.
That's interesting, yeah.
The really honing in on the studio as the instrument is there. To me, they are the Pepper band on Revolver. It just hasn't physically presented yet. And it's actually the better version of Pepper, in my opinion.
Any Beatle album, you're listening to superior music. Not superior rock music, not superior pop music. You're listening to the freaking Beatles. All right, these guys are the masters. They taught the rest of the submasters how to do it. Okay, I mean it gets down to that.
They just
and as far as an album that is their best weaved web, Sgt. Pepper is the best album they ever did. It's not my favorite, but it's in the top 4. And that's a high compliment coming from me because they all start to be masterpieces after like 3, maybe 4 albums. All right, the rest are all masterpieces that, and viewers have heard me say this, they're worthy of hanging in a museum somewhere. That is the art of our generation, and nobody. Oh, you were talking about, Summer of Love, Royce, right? Here, I was raised in the San Francisco area. I hung out in San Francisco.
In San Francisco, right.
In the Summer of Love, all right? So my backyard, and for every hookah-smoking caterpillar song played by the hub bands of the Summer of Love, there was always a Henry the Horse dancing the waltz. and then you'd hear Susie Q. Definitely, Creedence doesn't get credit for creating a psychedelic single. They did. Susie Q is psychedelia, right? For that, you go into Newspaper Taxis Appear on the Shore. So the soundtrack for that local event you were talking about, Royce, came from England, brother. Came from England, and it came from the Beatles, because that's the album you heard every time you walk down the street in a neighborhood, speakers blaring it from home to home. It was that popular.
Absolutely right, Michael. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
In fact, they took ownership of the Summer of Love.
If you picked one album only, that's the soundtrack right there for me, anyway.
Well, I know. Prior to that, you're thinking Golden Gate Park. You're thinking the Grateful Dead's down there. Jefferson Airplane is down there. Santana's down there.
Yep.
Doors Stop In. I mean, everybody was showing. Jimi Hendrix. They were all showing up down there.
Oh, it was magical. Absolutely magical. And we took it for granted. I mean, you could just go see these guys anytime, for a short period of time, And it was just wonderful. It just and the immediate bands that came out of that were just as forward moving. As we moved down a psychedelic.
That's exactly right. I want to tell Groovy Lisa that she's not the only one. Okay, I tend to like some of the later Beatles because they kind of brought them up to what was going on. The Beatles were a little poppy early on. We all know that. But, and like I said, a lot of people started, I think you can read this somewhere, people started kind of moving away from them towards more edgier music. Then all of a sudden, Sgt. Pepper's came out. And that's when I became a Beatles fan all over again.
And I wanted to say something about what Lisa was talking about. And what I said before, these are masterworks, even the early albums, Lisa. And the way I look at them, it's like, this is their blue period. This is their autumn period, right? Yeah. And so when you look at the Beatles like that, and yes, their later stuff got greater. There's no doubt about that. But there's a story when you listen to the early stuff. And by the way, I'll compare Hard Day's Night album, the British version, screw that. I hate the American version.
I have the American version.
I do not recognize them, Royce. They're wrong for so many reasons. So we could do a whole night on why the American version should be banned from the universe. Okay, but see, it's a whole work. These 13 albums. All right. And they should be listened to with that in mind. And also, by the way, these 13 albums, think of any other band that can come close to producing that output in that short a period of time and that high of a level of output. Impossible to even begin to accomplish.
I can't think of a single one.
No one did.
I love Led Zeppelin, but that was over 10 years.
And what they did on their own right was an amazing tale of titanic proportions in its own right.
Right.
It doesn't put them down. That you still have to put the Beatles on top, in my mind, anyway.
No, absolutely, too, because all the bands that followed had a template to follow. The Beatles didn't necessarily. They set the template, so that's where they get extra points.
That's a great point, Bruce.
And in my opinion, Bruce, I also think that if there is a progenitor, it was the Beatles and their son was Led Zeppelin. That's how high I rank Led Zeppelin. And I think they're every bit as art, and what they accomplish. That takes us off of Pepper. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of acknowledge what Lisa was saying, because I think a lot of people these days favor just primarily that. But Hard Day's Night, their third album, is as good as anything else they ever did. It is the first classic album that should be hanging in a museum. That the Beatles ever did, but it has to be the British version, not that piece of crap we got.
Well, Michael, I think what you're saying, I can really relate to it, because like you, I lived the Beatles' early albums in real time. Me too. I watched the British invasion come to town, and I listened, and I got educated by those same American albums, Royce. But I don't know. I don't know. I know you did, exactly, but I don't know. Looking back now, people that didn't experience that, would feel the same way about some of the earlier albums. I don't know if I could say that. I could say that for myself because I was there. So Bruce.
Yes.
Your favorite Beatles album is Revolver?
No, my favorite Beatles album has always been Abbey Road.
Oh, that you said that last week. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I think Michael's is Revolver.
Nope, mine would be Rubber Soul, but Revolver definitely number 2.
Yeah.
And then my former number 1, and Caitlin will appreciate this, for decades, my favorite Beatle album was the White Album. So, but as I got older and I started looking at them like I was ranting on earlier and saw them as masters at what they do, as much as Leonardo da Vinci, folks, then I started, I like that middle spot of the 2R albums. They're still kind of early Beatles.
Yeah.
And yet they are as forward thinking with Revolver.
Yeah, totally.
And Bruce was right earlier when he was saying, I agreed with him 100%. Sgt. Pepper began somewhere, well, actually at the very beginning of Revolver, Bruce, because Tomorrow Never Knows was the first song recorded for that album. So now the rest of the album, except for maybe She Said, didn't quite go to those heights, but then in America we get those 2 songs taken off the album, right, and so we didn't understand what a truly great masterpiece this was.
That it was, right.
And to this day I hear people saying I kind of prefer the American version,
right,
and it does have a sound, but it's not the story.
No, it's not the story.
And I want the story. I want to give these master songwriters their proper due.
Chris Elliott's got a pretty cool comment here. What does anyone think about the usual comparison of Sgt. Pepper's and Pet Sounds as far as an influence?
Lots of influence. The third song they recorded for this album that got taken off, we've already talked about that, Penny Lane. Paul McCartney made it clear to Jeff Emmerich that he would absolutely tolerate nothing less than absolute clarity on the recordings on this album, because he was stunned with the clarity he was hearing on Pet Sounds with the Beach Boys and what Brian had already accomplished there. And so right from the start, Jeff Emmerich said, now how in the hell am I going to do that? And he only recorded 1 instrument per track, to the chagrin of both George Harrison and Ringo Starr as that process continued, per instrument. All right, 1 track, 1 instrument, and a lot of bouncing. Everybody goes, hey, this is the world's greatest 4-track recorded masterpiece. And yes, in a way it is, but it's also not that, because there was a lot of bouncing between 2 4-track recorders, and a lot of technology developed not only by Jeff Emmerich, but Ken Townsend, and the engineers they had were so freaking brilliant, folks. They were breaking records and reestablishing new rules all in 9 or 5 months. Right. Isn't that amazing?
That's amazing.
What?
Yes, it is.
What a tale.
You could definitely hear the influence of Pet Sounds on Pepper, for sure. I mean, in terms of arrangements, McCartney was definitely influenced. And even a song like She's Leaving Home, that sounds like it could have been on Pet Sounds. It's like a Brian Wilson track in a way. So,
and I think the reason it did is because McCartney got pissed at George Martin for being too busy with Cilla Black to arrange the strings. He hired Leander, Michael Leander, his last name's Leander, to score it. And it shows. And somehow it fits perfect on that album. I know Martin hardly ever forgave Paul for that. He felt very slapped in the face for that. But there was that crystal clarity. Penny Lane, what I was talking about before, he laid down 1 track of piano after another, no click track, not even Ringo tapping out a beat. He is the metronome. And he laid down probably 20 keyboards for that keyboard sound that you hear on Penny Lane. And Jeff Emmerich said, we mixed them so many times that vast majority of them were lost in the mix, but it created a blend. Ask AI to do that.
Yeah.
All right? That's human creativity, baby.